Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and the month of March 2014 brought world attention to the Ukraine, as Russian President Vladimir Putin orchestrated a Russian takeover of Ukrainian Crimea. And in the Jewish community, a byproduct of events in Crimea has been an awakened awareness of the Jewish community that lives in the Ukraine. Who are they? Why are Jews living in the Ukraine, given the history of anti-Semitism in that country? And how are the Jews of the Ukraine doing now? Are they physically safe? Are they financially secure? Well, for some answers and for an understanding of Jewish life in the Ukraine today, I am honored to be sitting with the Chief Rabbi of the Ukraine and a Vice President of the World Jewish Congress of Europe, Rabbi Yaakov Dov Bleich. Let me tell you a little bit about Rabbi Bleich. He was born in the United States, studied in Jerusalem, and received his smicha, his rabbinic ordination, from Yeshiva Karlin Stolin in Brooklyn. In 1990, Rabbi Bleich was appointed Chief Rabbi of Kiev and the Ukraine, and he's been instrumental in founding the Kiev Jewish Community Center, the Kiev Jewish City Community, and the Union of Orthodox and the Union of Jewish Religious Organizations of the Ukraine. Rabbi Bleich also founded a number of critical institutions of Jewish life in the Ukraine, including the first Jewish day school and the first Jewish orphanage and boarding school in the Ukraine, the Chesed Avot Welfare Society of Kyiv, and the Magen Avot Social Services Network of the Ukraine. And Yaakov, it is such a pleasure having you, and I thank you for, I know what your schedule is right now, that you carved out a moment to sit here on Shalom TV and L'Chaim is most gracious of you, and I thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I would never think of coming to the United States and not coming to Shalom TV.
That is so sweet of you. I want to talk a moment about you, and then we go to the Ukraine. You have a fascinating personal history. You were born in?
Brooklyn, USA.
Okay. You studied a bit also in Chicago.
I went to yeshiva in Chicago and Cleveland, then I went to Israel, and I came back.
Okay. You were born into an Orthodox family?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And, you know, if I were in your home growing up, first of all, your mother and father are?
They are. They're living in Israel now.
Mazel tov.
Yeah,
their names are?
Mr. and Mrs. Bleich.
Okay. You have any siblings?
Yes. I'm one of 10.
One of 10. Okay.
I have the great fortune of being a middle child.
If I was in your home as you were growing up in Brooklyn, what was the Jewish character, the flavor of your home as you remember it?
Oh, great flavor. It was like chicken soup.
Yes.
It was a chicken soup home. My mother makes great chicken soup.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. We have a great home. We grew up in Borough Park in Brooklyn. I went to Yeshiva Karlin Stolin, so we were more of a Hasidish type of family.
Yes.
My father worked for New York Life Insurance Company. My mother had her own, personal insurance business. My mother taught English as a second language. She was a teacher. When I remember her working, she was teaching and doing insurance at the same time. And that's the way it is. Went to yeshiva and, got a great liking for Jews and Judaism.
Yes, and that's what I wanted you to speak about for one moment, Yaakov. You love Jews and Judaism, yes?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yes,
I do.
okay.
I have a passion for it.
Okay. Can you describe it all? How does that happen?
Let me tell you, first of all, in the house, my parents were always had guests, very different guests. It wasn't always, people that looked like us and act like us, but my parents had a very, very open home, a lot of guests. I also learned in Stolin, and Stolin, part of what they taught us always was to be outgoing, to bring other Jews closer to Judaism, closer to God and stuff like that. At their own pace, at your own step, and they taught us to think, and to try and do things and reach out, and that's how I got this job in Kiev.
How did you get the job?
I visited the Soviet Union 2 times before I got the job.
What were you doing at the time?
I was studying. I was a student. I was married already, but I was like sort of a graduate student going for the rabbinate. The first time I went. The second time I was already teaching at a yeshiva high school, and
Okay,
my
but Yaakov,
community.
you went there for a reason.
I went there the first time. I went just to go visit some graves, and because it was exciting to get the Soviet Union. That's why I went. I went with a group of friends, with 20 of us, and we went. It was the Soviet Union, so it was exciting for any American to go see, the great evil empire. So we went there, and it was in '88. The second time I went was in '89. Second time I went already with a rabbi, and we were on a religious mission. So we were doing Jewish divorces. Umbrella? It was not really an umbrella, because this rabbi that went, we were going to do a very unique and rare thing called chalitza, when someone passes away without children. So the wife, before she gets married, in biblical times, would have to marry the man's brother in order to maintain the name, etc. So
that's been outlawed, and chalitza is now the only option.
Yeah, is the option, right? So I went with...
and she releases the next of kin. She doesn't have to marry him.
This next of kin
yes.
was an older officer in the Soviet army living in the Soviet Union.
Really?
And she came from Israel, and we came and did this chalitza thing. It was an awesome type of experience. I went with the rabbi, Rabbi Pinchas Rabinowitz from Muncie, and when I came back from that trip, so the offers just started rolling in. Would you like to go to the Soviet Union to become a rabbi? And obviously, it's not the type of thing you come home and tell your wife, oh, I was offered a job in the Soviet Union, right? So I didn't tell her about the first offer or the second offer, but when I got the third offer, that was Kiev, and then it was already exciting. So I went to the Rebbe, the Stalin Rebbe, and I told him, listen, I got these 3 offers, and I don't know what it means. And he says, Kiev is the most exciting one, and you should work on going to Kiev. That was in October of 1989. By the time we got our act together and everything else, we ended up going on January 3rd, 1990. We arrived there January 4th. It was quite an interesting experience.
Are you glad you took the position of chief rabbi of the Ukraine, first Kiev and then Ukraine?
I'm sure I'm glad. I mean, if I had to do it all over again,
yes.
would I do it again?
Yes.
I may have done it differently, and I would do it again.
You would do it again, yes. What's the most wonderful part of it?
I think one of the most rewarding parts is to see the kids today and the families that have come out. You have to realize that I'm there for 24 years, and besides thousands of students that I have throughout the world, and I'm saying thousands, I mean literally thousands, we also have a beautiful community today that's growing in Kiev and throughout Ukraine. So in Kiev, I have my own, little congregation. Not so little, I'm saying, but the central
families?
Congregation, which like 150 families.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to see, because this congregation, this community, is actually rebuilding Jewish life in a place that was totally written off for anything Jewish.
Totally.
Yeah.
You heard my intro where I said, who are these people? Why are they still there? I want you to describe for our audience, because most American Jews have no clue that there is even any Jewish community, let alone a thriving Jewish community in the Ukraine. So who are these people and why are they there, and how are they doing?
Let me explain to you. I get this question a lot now, especially with the problems that we're having with the community. Why doesn't everybody just pick up and leave to Israel? And this will answer your question as well. I mean, you have to realize that when I moved to Ukraine, in our estimation, there were probably 1.5 million Jews living in Ukraine at that time, 1989. There were officially Jews that were in their passports Jews, 500,000. But we have done, according to the research that we've done, only 1/3 of the Jews had Jew written in their passports. So there were approximately 1.5 million. Today we're down to 360,000. So when people say, why don't they leave? Whoever wanted to leave left. And whoever wants to leave today can still leave. In other words, it's an open society. It's a democratic society. People could, have freedom of movement. They can go wherever they want. The people that are there, let's not forget, you have young people that are professionals that have jobs there. You have older people. From our population, approximately 120,000 are elderly Jews that are receiving aid from the Jewish community, through the Joint Distribution Committee and other international organizations and local organizations. What is supposed to happen to these 120,000 people? There's no way that they can all just pick themselves up and leave. They don't have relatives. They don't have anyone to care for them. It's not so simple, for people to just pick themselves up and leave. So I would say the 360,000 Jews that are living in Ukraine today, these are people that have chosen to make their life in Ukraine. They have seen a future there for themselves, were educated, got jobs, bought homes, and that's where they want to live.
How many of these families have a long history in the Ukraine?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them, yeah. You're talking about indigenous Ukrainian Jews. I'm saying you're talking about people that are there for years and years and generations.
Prior to World War II, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I'm saying, but you have to realize that, before the revolution, the Russian Revolution, Kiev was out of the Pale of Settlement. It wasn't easy for Jews to live there. So, but it was after that was abolished that Kiev really became a big center of Jewish life. It wasn't such a big center of Jewish life before before the 20th century. At the end of the 19th century, there were a lot of Jews living there, but only wealthy Jews. There weren't, really great rabbis there. There were no yeshivas or Jewish schools there, really. It all came with the breakup of the abolishment of the Pale of Settlement,
yes.
when Jews were allowed to move there, and the community started building, and refugees during World War I, and that's how the community really got built up. And then up until World War II, Kiev was Yud Reign, Babi Yar, the Jews were all killed.
Yes.
Any Jews that were alive in Kiev were in hiding, and then after World War II, they came back to Kiev.
Okay, and I want you to talk more about this, because the way in which the common perception of Jews in Kiev and Jews in the Ukraine is, it was a wellspring of some of the most vicious anti-Semitism, even before Babi Yar. At the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, it was known for some of the worst pogroms
Ukraine
in
in general, not Kiev,
yes.
but Ukraine, yeah.
And then you had Babi Yar, which was this horrific massacre.
Right. First mass murder during World War II.
Okay. And so, you sort of say to yourself, what is there that would attract a Jew after the Holocaust to want to build a life there, given the history?
Yeah,
the Ukrainian the Ukrainian indigenous population had not been very nice to Jews.
Right. I think the way I see it, and what I think happened is that the people that came back were coming back home. It's not that they were able to leave after World War II. Let's not forget, after World War II, whoever was a Polish citizen was able to leave. The people that came from Western Ukraine, that was part of Poland, their Polish citizenship, they were able to leave. The people that were Soviet citizens were not allowed to leave. And the Iron Curtain was up. So I don't know if it was by choice after World War II that people came back to Kiev, or where should they have stayed in the Far East, where they were evacuated to, or gone somewhere else. They couldn't really go anywhere else. Whoever was able to leave left. So you had a community here of Jews that were held there basically against their will. The Soviet Union was the largest prison in the world. And these people built up their lives there. They had children there. They got married. They integrated into the Soviet society to whatever extent they were able to. By the time the Soviet Union fell apart and the doors opened, the gates opened in 1990 and further, whoever was able to left. Whoever wanted to left. Whoever was not able to or didn't want to stayed. So this community is a remnant. It's not, you're not talking about people that are immigrating into Ukraine to live in Ukraine. You're talking about people that grew up there, were not able to leave. Whoever was able to leave left in 1990. And like I say, we went from 1.5 million down to 360,000. That's quite a drop in the Jewish population. Most of them leaving to Israel, by the way. The largest number of Ukrainian immigrants left to Israel in the 1990s. Another pretty large number, and this is where your question should be, went to Germany. Why would they go to Germany? And I'm talking about, I had a next door neighbor in my floor where I lived in Kiev at that time, that her husband was killed in the war, and she emigrated to Germany with her kids. One of the greatest things, the Soviets didn't study history. They studied selective history, and they rewrote history to the way it was good for them. So many people, younger people, weren't so aware of the Holocaust and World War II the way we are. So they live there, and they'll go to Germany if they can get better social care there as well. So it's not such a big question, how strong is the Jewish identity of the people there living in Ukraine today is question number one. And then question number two is how closely is that identity connected to what happened during World War II? And these are two separate questions for us. In the United States, we'll be able to connect it a lot easier. Over there, I don't think so.
Okay. One of the reasons that we have the chance to meet is that a very dear friend of Shalom TV and a friend of yours, Naomi Vilko, who's on our board, really made sure that there was an opportunity for us to sit together. And one of the reasons why it was so important to her is that she has family, some of her family is in the Ukraine, has been in the Ukraine, and she is very concerned about their well-being and their welfare. Describe for me now, what's the level of anti-Semitism in Kiev and the Ukraine in general, and to what degree is there living day-to-day discrimination the Jews of the Ukraine have to deal with?
Can I tell you something, please?
Please do.
Don't say the Ukraine, because we get very nervous. us Ukrainian patriots don't like when you say
You
the
just
Ukraine.
call it Ukraine, right?
We call it Ukraine.
Yeah,
because
why is that?
The Ukraine reminds us of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic.
Okay.
Especially in times like now. We got to be careful.
Very
In any
interesting.
case, yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Okay.
But in
All right,
Yiddish,
from
we
now
say,
on-
"Segrische wird
Yes.
mir in der Ohren." So, yeah,
Jews
so,
of Ukraine.
Jews of Ukraine. So let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff coming on today because of the Russian propaganda that's going around about the terrible anti-Semitism and these fascists that took over the government, which is a bunch of baloney. According to the level, I would say the levels of anti-Semitism today in Ukraine there are anti-Semitic acts, okay? And I keep on saying this. I'm not an apologist for Ukrainian anti-Semites. There are Ukrainian anti-Semites and there is a Ukrainian anti-Semitism. There is no more government anti-Semitism the way it was during the Soviet Union. So the government basically eradicated that level of anti-Semitism. Today we even have a deputy prime minister who's a Jewish guy, a couple of governors who are Jews. So we do have Jews, represented in the government to whatever extent. There is, what we call street anti-Semitism, street-level anti-Semitism, which, was there. You have it in the United States as well. You have it throughout the world and in Western Europe. So there is anti-Semitism in Ukraine. What are we afraid of today, though? We have two fears that are important today for the Jewish community. Fear number one is because of the revolution that took place throughout the months of December, January, and February. So there was a certain amount of anarchy that took place, and people were out there with weapons in the streets, and we were afraid that they would turn those weapons, God forbid, against national minorities, including Jews, who usually suffer at times of unrest and upheaval. And thank God that didn't really happen. The second thing that we were afraid of, and this is the thing that really is the most frightening thing, was the issue of provocations, or people trying to make the Ukrainians look bad and then attacking Jews, dressing up. This is what the Soviets were really professional at. After World War II, when they ran their campaign against the Ukrainian nationalists, they would dress up as Ukrainian nationalists to just go and kill people, and they would say, blame it on the Ukrainian nationalists. So this is, part of Soviet propaganda, and thank God the Russians retained a lot of things that they got from the Soviet Union, a lot of property, a lot of money, and also a lot of propaganda. So we have today, the Jewish community throughout Ukraine has really, really strengthened their security. At all, Jewish buildings, schools, community centers, synagogues, we had to do it. Because we're afraid of Ukrainian anti-Semitism, God forbid, and we're also afraid of the Russian anti-Semitism, which will dress up as a Ukrainian and will do it. So we've had a number of attacks. I'm not, saying that we haven't had any attacks. We've had a number of attacks. Especially my community in Kiev has had 4 or 5 attacks over the last couple of months.
Of what nature?
We had 2 guys stabbed, 2 stabbings, stabbed in the legs, which means that these guys, they had them on the floor if they were really wanted it, God forbid. I don't want to say it. And we had a couple of guys beat up as well. We had an assault last Friday of a young couple, a Jewish couple coming to the synagogue. So we have had these attacks, and we have to strengthen our security and precautions because of that. Now, so the first thing is, yes, there is anti-Semitism. There are anti-Semitic attacks in Ukraine, and we have to be careful. We have to strengthen our security. That's the answer to question number one.
Does the Ukrainian police protect you?
100%. Yeah, that's the second thing I was getting to. The second question is who is doing these attacks. Mm-hmm. So what we've had now is that we've had an unbelievable response from the police and security services over the last couple of weeks since the new government came in, which, to an extent reassures us that they're not, in cahoots with the attackers, which was a problem that we had in January. Because in January, when the revolution was going on, the people in power wanted to make the demonstrators look bad, and if there were attacks, they would say, oh, these guys are doing the attacks, and, we had a lot of this. We didn't want to be, and we don't want to be an object within this debate. The Jewish community doesn't want to be a part of the debate, and unfortunately, different elements, especially Putin and some of the Russian foreign ministry statements, keep on bringing us back into the forefront and saying, oh, Jews are being attacked, and that's why Russia has to come protect the Jews. You know something? There's a good joke that's going around in Kiev now that says, I don't speak Russian in Kiev anymore. Not because I'm afraid I'll be discriminated against, but I'm afraid someone may come to save me. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm a rabbi, so we try to stay out of politics, ha ha ha. And but at the same time, I have to speak up for my community. I mean, in my community now is in danger of being abused. Anti-Semitism is being cynically abused now, by people in Russia and in other places, trying to, put on this mantra of anti-Semitism. Oh, Ukrainians have been anti-Semitic for so many generations. These people are coming. They're Ukrainian nationalists. They're banderovцы. They're anti-Semites. They're fascists. Give them a chance. I mean, these guys that are in power are young, good, Western-educated people that want to really bring a Western way of life to Ukraine, and there are people that don't like that. People that want to stay Eastern.
You seem to be saying that at the moment, if we're living with you for a month, 2 months, and I had a sense of this community, the Ukrainians among whom the Jews of Ukraine live, do in no way treat them differently, do not have any anti-Semitic instincts, and that we would get along with each other.
We get along. I'm saying I got along with every single government since I'm there in 24 years.
I'm talking about the shopkeeper.
And the shopkeeper
I'm talking
also,
about the movie theater.
The movie theater.
The schools.
The schools. We have great schools, and we have our own schools, and we have Jewish kids and Ukrainian schools.
It also sounds, Yaakov, that it's much better than, for example, France and Paris, and
100%,
when you go to a synagogue in Paris,
right.
There's a cop car in the front, and it's not just a cop car in the front, because there are even police cars sometimes in the United States.
Right.
But the Jews are timidly trying to as if they're not being seen, as they walk up to the front door of the synagogue, and then the minute the service is over, they disappear. No one hangs around outside a Paris synagogue. There's nothing like that in your world, correct?
In Ukraine, very good.
In Ukraine, there's nothing like that.
Not really, no. I'm saying to an extent now because of the attacks, so we are more careful about guys hanging out in the street.
Is there a police car?
But right now, there's no police car. We have our own security there in front.
What do you mean your own security?
We hired
Jewish kids
guards. No, we hired security companies, and that's really what we're spending a lot of money on.
But the example is a service is over. Do people congregate, or do they just disperse as fast as possible?
We have a big courtyard in the synagogue.
Yes.
Come on, guys hang out there all the time.
Yes, all right.
We do. I mean, the synagogue is the center of Jewish life by us, and we have a great community. That's where everybody gets. That's where it happens.
Okay.
Come on, the kids are all there playing. The women come out there to to schmooze.
Nice
guys
people.
are out there. Oh, very nice.
You have a nice group.
Oh, we have a gorgeous community.
That's wonderful.
It's the nicest
I got to see
community
it.
in Kiev,
Okay, so one thing that Naomi does not have to worry about is anti-Semitism for her relatives. Now, I asked you...
No, I didn't say that. That's what you said. I didn't say that. I said we do have to be careful.
The way you described
I said that the situation is tense. The situation is volatile. Yeah.
It's tense and volatile.
Yeah, tense and volatile, mainly because Russia attacked Crimea.
How was it before that?
Let me tell you how it is, okay? And I'll describe it to you in different stages. Okay,
fair
stage one was before before December 1st, let's say 2013. People were feeling great. Jews felt comfortable and everything else. Stage two, December 1st, 2013, you have this revolution starting to get up.
Within the Ukraine?
Within Kiev. Mostly it was based in Kiev, okay? So in Kiev, people were a little bit, starting to be a little bit more careful because, you had this anarchy and these violent demonstrations that were taking place, with violence very often beginning from the government, I must say that, but whatever, there's still violence is violence from either way. January, we have our first attack within our community. A guy is followed home from the synagogue and beaten up. The synagogue, our community, starts really going into a protective mode. People are a little afraid. This was on a Saturday night, right after Shabbat services. The following Friday night, a guy followed home from the synagogue and stabbed. That's it. It's over. People are afraid to walk out in the street now. And then we hire this major security guards to guard the synagogue, the day schools, the community centers, and everywhere else. That was January of 2014. Now, things started looking good, and we were getting optimistic when Yanukovych ran away and the new government came into place. The day the new government is sworn in, on Thursday, February 26th or whatever it was, or 28th, that's the day that Russia invades Crimea. And then there's a new element put into the equation because of the Russian, abuse and cynical abuse, I would say, of anti-Semitism as a justification for their thing. So right now, everybody has security. Everybody's careful. To say, should people run away? No, we haven't told people to evacuate. We don't feel that it's that dangerous. But we do say, don't walk alone at night if you don't have to. Don't go traveling around to Ukraine if you don't have to. I'm there all the time, obviously, but and my community is there, and I have foreigners working for me in my community and other communities throughout Ukraine.
You're also very visible.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm the most invisible guy in town.
Are you really?
Yeah, but it's true. We are quite visible. Yeah,
You're
we
very
are. We're
visible.
Jewish. We're really Jewish and proud of it.
Right.
We have this big sign, but people come up to me and cross themselves all the time in Ukraine. So I look like a batushka, So I could basically, blend in with my Orthodox colleagues. I mean, Orthodox Christian colleagues.
Yes, I understand.
So
except you dress differently.
come on, just a little bit different. The beard is there.
That's all.
Yeah. It's all right. The head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, they dress Orthodox as well. They're Eastern Rite Catholics. He tells me all the time, people come and say, "Hey, Rabbi, where's the synagogue?" So we have a deal going on.
Outside of Kiev, if you were to travel outside of Kiev,
Depends where.
Would you be less concerned
where.
about anti-Semitism?
Depends where. At this point right now, the Russians are trying to destabilize the eastern seaboard.
Correct.
Of Ukraine seaboard, the eastern parts of Ukraine. So Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, even Odessa, to a great extent, have seen destabilization that's being taken place, that's being instigated by Russian agents that are either there or have come in plants. They get the people together. Most of what they do is they do it for the TV. It's planted stuff, do TV, and then they film it and then say, okay, guys, show's over. Lights, camera. That's what happens. There was a great article about it written in an International New York Times last week about a journalist that saw the whole thing, how it was set up, filmed, and how it's all over, and these guys are all back home. So in those parts, I think that we're going to see more provocations. That's really what I see. Crimea is obviously not a good place to be now, but there are 15 or 17,000 Jews living there, and they're not running away either so fast. So, it's all relative, really. But I would say, and this is what the United States Embassy keeps on saying, non-essential travel to those parts, keep it away. We don't know. Russia can attack and invade Ukraine at any moment from those. They have along the border of the eastern part of Ukraine, they have a troop buildup now. Ukraine doesn't have much of an army to speak of that's going to fight against the Russians, and we see what they've done to them in Crimea. And they can't rely on the allies that guarantee the territorial integrity, which are the United States and Great Britain, and Russia, by the way. They guaranteed Ukraine territorial integrity when they voluntarily gave up their nuclear weapons in 1994. So I hope that Israel is listening to this program, right? That's what the guarantees are worth, if you know what I'm talking about, right? So they got a guarantee, and it's worthless, basically. So, the sanctions, and I heard that Obama has threatened Putin that he's going to cancel another meeting if he goes further into Ukraine. And Putin is really afraid of that.
Well, there are some economic sanctions that have been leveled on individual Russians.
Oh, yeah. That was terrible. You didn't hear what happened?
No, what happened?
The day they announced the sanctions, the Russian stock market shot up. Because they thought there'll be serious sanctions. When they heard the sanctions, the stock market went up. Yeah, so it's... But listen, we have a great foreign policy, and it's definitely dictated by a very smart man, a very able man. And foreign policy in the United States is really someone that thinks.
The we refers to
thinker.
America.
The United States of America has a great foreign policy, and it's dictated by a very smart man, a man who's very strong, really knows what he wants, knows where he wants to get. His name is Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm. At the moment, are Ukrainians angry? Are Ukrainian Jews angry at President Obama?
Ukrainians in general, I mean, some of those that don't really know Obama were really sure that the Americans are going to put boots on the ground because they guaranteed it. Their territorial integrity. They were sure the Americans are coming in there with guns blasting, like the movies, right? The American guys.
You knew better.
Oh yeah, I was with a friend of mine the day the invasion took place. I was at a meeting of the European Jewish Congress. This was funny, with a guy who was a former minister in the Ukrainian government, a Jewish guy, and I say, what do you think is going to happen? He says, well, the Americans are going to come in. I said, yeah, right. Like when the two positives make a negative, right? So he said, that's not happening. He couldn't believe it. He says, really? But they guaranteed it. They signed it. I said, yeah, that's what it's worth. So the Americans, they could make more serious sanctions. They could get out there.
If you were advising the American administration and the White House, what would you want? America is not sending
If I was advising
troops.
the
America is not
government,
sending troops.
You know what I would do?
Short of troops, what do you want America
First thing
to
I would do if I was advising the American administration, the first thing I would do is resign. That's the first thing I would do. But seriously, I think that they don't have to send troops. What they have to do is they have to supply, and I'm quoting Charles Krauthammer because he wrote a great article about what the Americans can do that was serious. The first thing is they can put down arms and advisors, technical advisors, and that's what the Ukraine is looking for. NATO to send in, to help arm the Ukrainian army, send in the technical advisors, because this is really technical advisors and arms. That's the secret code that the Russians know what it means, because they used to do that. They did that in Egypt, and they did it in many places. And whenever the NATO and the Americans have done that, that has been serious movement. That's putting people on the ground, not soldiers, not fighters, not boots on the ground, so to speak, but it's putting people out there. The Russians will see that the West is serious about protecting Ukraine's territorial integrity. That's number one. Number two is, I would say that there has to be a lot more serious economic sanctions against Russia. Serious
And there
economic
could be.
sanctions. I'm sure there could be. I'm sure they can do things to make the Russians really, hurt. They put sanctions against one bank, Bank Russia, because he's a friend of FOV, a friend of Volodya's, right? They put him, these things are good, and it's a good start, but I think that really the United States and its Western allies, the European Union, have to come up with more serious sanctions to really make it hurt, make Russia hurt. I mean, forget about Russia's out of the G8. Russia is out of, the international club of developed nations. They're out
Does
of it.
Does Putin care?
I'm sure to an extent he cares. But, then he starts making, probably the way his head works is that, what is he losing and what is he gaining? And if he feels that he's gaining the prestige and he's bringing back the prestige to the Soviet Empire, what he calls the Russian Empire, and he's gaining support from the people of Russia, so he doesn't care really what the West is doing to him. Because even, if you ask me, even his entry into these clubs was in order to gain local, acceptance and support. So I don't think that the Russian people will support a war against Ukraine. I think he's going to have a hard time getting Russian soldiers to shoot against Ukrainians. I really do. And the Ukrainians definitely aren't looking to shoot against the Russians. It's not, you have to realize that there is so much interaction and there are such an integrated and assimilated countries that nobody is looking for that. The question is how sure of himself he is that he can go into the motherland in Ukraine, that's what they call it, which is, not the Crimea, but the rest of Ukraine, and make sure that there's not going to be fighting back. And I'm not sure. I think it'll be very bad if he does go into Ukraine.
I have been of the opinion that as serious as it was for Putin to take Crimea, he's not going further. Do you think I'm wrong?
Everybody thinks you're wrong now, especially the greatest proof is in the pudding, because Putin said he's not going further. That's the biggest proof that he probably is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everything there is backwards.
Are you worried that all of Ukraine could fall to
Russia? No, I don't think that's what his plan is. I think he would like to probably try and get his hands on Kharkiv, Lugansk, Donetsk. I think that he would like to get his hands on Odessa. I would think he may want to have a contiguous piece of land that can take him into Pridnestrova, which is part of Moldova, that he may want to annex to Russia as well. That's what people think. But something, I can't and I won't prophesize about what he's thinking and why he's thinking it, because I don't know how his mind works. But he has a plan. There's no question about it. Unlike some of the people that are on the other side of the barricades.
To any extent, does this remind you, is it reminiscent to you of Hitler in the early days of World War II?
Okay, let's not go there. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I would say, I'm not, God forbid, comparing Putin to Hitler, okay? It's not, I don't think he's a Hitler, and I didn't call him Haman on Purim. I said he's more reminiscent of Achashverosh than of Haman, of the king that...
he's somewhere in between.
Yeah, whatever. But in any case, some of the strategy that he's been using, which is, for instance, this destabilization of the eastern parts of Ukraine, sending in the agents, having these demonstrations staged, right? And then saying, okay, I have to help these Russian-speaking people. That's something of what, Hitler did in Sudetenland when he, wanted to take over the German parts of the Czech Republic and stuff like that, of Czechoslovakia at that time, whatever it was, and Austria. The annexation, of course, obviously was... So it's bringing up these memories amongst a lot of people. There's something, you remind me of an interesting thing. I met at the United Nations 10 days ago or so, 2 weeks ago, with the representative of the World Council of Crimean Tatars. They're the indigenous peoples of Crimea.
Correct.
Now, the Crimean Tatars today are only 14% of the entire population of Crimea. And I hear people like Henry Kissinger who's 91 years old and should have been retired many years ago, saying really stupid things like, what do you want? 60% of the people living in the Crimea are Russians, so obviously they should be part of Russia. Did anybody ever stop and think, why are 60% of the people living in Crimea Russians? What happened to the indigenous community that Stalin sent away? And he had them sort of, they had their own little Holocaust there. They were deported. So she tells us, this woman, she grew up in Borough Park, and she's a Crimean Tatar. She says, and psychologically, think about this. She says that, can you imagine the Russians coming back into Crimea is for us as if the Germans would be coming back and taking over Israel. She said this to me and blew me away. Because I think to myself, something? I never saw it as that. And she says they are the ones that annihilated our people. They have their name, I don't remember what it's called, for their little Holocaust there that happened when their people were deported to the Far East and many of them were killed. And she says what's happening now is in their collective memory, they're back. They're back. They say there's no way we can't live with that. It can't happen. This is something that we as Jews can identify with. This small, the Crimean Tatars. Who are they? I mean, I'm friendly with many of them from Ukraine, obviously, and the head of one of their leaders, who I'm very, very friendly with, who's a member of the Ukrainian parliament, and he was the head of their Majlis, which is their local sort of parliament and representative. So I think that we as Jews have to, in some ways, rethink our own history and how we react to these types of things.
A profound thought. I appreciate it. What will it mean for the Jews of Ukraine if, in fact, Putin does come into the eastern parts of Ukraine?
Let me tell you something. Ukraine is a democratic country at this point. The Jewish communities are democratically run, elected, managed. The rabbis there, the schools, the communities. Everybody does their thing. It's a great community because it has developed in a democracy, and there's a difference to a Jewish community developing in a democracy to a Jewish community that develops in an authoritarian or otherwise controlled state. So there's a tremendous difference between the Jewish community in Ukraine and in Russia. It is totally different. Now, that doesn't mean, and people keep asking me, is Putin good for the Jews? Look at the Jewish community in Russia. They have their style of Jewish community. I'm not commenting on their style of Jewish community. That's for Russia and the Russian Jews and the Russian rabbis, Russian community leaders to decide. I'm speaking about the Jewish community in Ukraine.
Yes.
And I think that if he comes in, the cities and the oblasts or regions that he comes into, the Jewish communities will not be the same. I think that many people, will not feel that type of, development, which is, again, it's a democratic development. And don't forget, the destruction and the redistribution of personal and private property that comes along with war and that comes along with invasion. I mean, look at Crimea. People own houses there. People own vacation homes there. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars that suddenly it all became Russian. What happened? And this is something that really cannot be accepted by the world today. Let me just put it this way, and this is a historical fact. No two democracies have ever gone to war with each other, right? Think about that. Here you have Russia just invading a neighboring country that has been since 1954. You may like it, you may not like it, but look what's happening. What happens if Great Britain comes and starts taking back some of their territories, right? And how are the Jews coming back to Israel, because that's ours, and maybe the American Indians are going to come back to the United States and take over. I mean, what does that do to the world order? And I think that's why the Western world is really, really, worried about this, but not worried enough.
Not worried enough
to do something, just to talk about it.
All right, come back again to who the Ukrainian Jews are. I asked you first, are they physically safe? Are they financially secure? Does Naomi have a reason to be concerned for her relatives, not because of anti-Semitism, but because they're poor?
Yeah, it depends where they live, basically. And let me tell you, the Jewish community of Ukraine, with its development, again, as a democratic society and a market economy, we had a great economy, booming, blustering, booming economy until the world economic crisis in 2009, I think it was, right? So at that point, the community was actually being supported, majority, 60, 70% of the community was being supported by local Jews, middle class, business people that were donating money to the community. That all fell apart when the world economic crisis started and the bubble burst, so to speak. So everything went down. To give you an example, my apartment that I live in Kiev probably was worth $1 million, 5 or 6 years ago. $250,000 today. So you have to understand that people that were in the real estate business lost a lot of money. A lot of my supporters lost money. Then entered into the stage Yanukovych and company. Yanukovych basically was able to institutionalize a certain amount of corruption, which means that if people were making money, there was somebody knocking on the doorstep taking away part of it, and that stopped foreign investment. It stopped a lot of investment in general. People just didn't want to start businesses because they would have to give away a good part of it. So, having said all that, the Jewish community today may be in sort of, to an extent, an economic crisis. Myself personally, opened up an office in the United States to do fundraising. I'm an American. So even though I'm living in Ukraine for 24 years, I have Jeff Cohen with me, we run an organization today called United Jewish Communities of Eastern Europe and Asia, and we brought together representatives of different communities in Eastern Europe and Asia, and are trying to set up a fundraising office here in the United States, because American Jews, even in bad times, especially in good times, are philanthropic.
And what do you need funds for?
For everything. You're talking about from education, welfare. We have assisted living home for Holocaust survivors. We have kindergartens, we have schools, community centers, student centers, synagogues, for just to maintain it. We have food programs for hungry kids. We have orphanages in Odessa, Tikva orphanages that we work with. We have stuff going on all over, the former Soviet Union, basically. We're working with, different networks of Jewish day schools and orphanages.
So a whole series of social services.
Yeah, it's health, education, and welfare, so to speak, to an extent.
Yes, right.
So, so the Jews are, to an extent, secure the way they were, living the way they were. There's a very good social welfare network for the Jewish community that's run by the JDC, right? And we don't have right now at this point yet, I would say a crisis proportions for humanitarian crisis yet. But we don't know what's going to be. If God forbid there will be an invasion, I would say at that point we'll have to rethink it and see. Don't forget, Ukraine is a food industry country. There's a lot of food that's produced, but a lot of those production is done in eastern Ukraine as well. So it's very hard to know, what disruptions will come about. When there's war, it brings disruptions, and there will be a humanitarian crisis at that point. There is, to an extent, a humanitarian crisis now in Crimea, to a great extent. Yes. I'll be meeting with the rabbi of Simferopol, Rabbi Lifshitz. He's a Lubavitcher Chassid. I'll be meeting him this evening, to discuss what's going on in his community and what we can do there to help.
In America, there are many more very, very poor Jews than many American Jews imagine.
I know that.
In addition, there are many aged survivors of the Holocaust.
Right, I know that.
Who are living very poorly. There's been this scandal about the claims conference, and has enough money come to Holocaust survivors and the families that really, the money that we were able to secure from Germany, for example, was intended for. To what extent is that true also for the Jews of Ukraine?
Disclosure, I'm on the board of the claims conference.
Okay.
Okay, let me just give a disclosure first of all. So I know what the claims conference does here, and I know what the claims conference does there. Okay, first of all, the claims conference here, I just wanted just one word about that. Most of the scandals and the things that you hear are a result of people not understanding what the claims conference is. The claims conference doesn't do fundraising for Holocaust survivors. They get money from the German government and they pass it on to Holocaust survivors.
But isn't that their main goal?
That's what they do.
Their main goal is to be a conduit.
That's what they do.
Of money to 100%. Survivors.
And that's what they do.
Okay.
They are tremendously helping a tremendous amount of Holocaust survivors throughout the world with billions and billions of dollars.
Okay. I don't want to
I'm not going to
digress.
Get to that. Okay. Now let me get about Ukraine. The Claims Conference is active with Ukrainian Jews as well. First of all, through the Cheseds and the Jewish Distribution Committee. So they get home care. They get a lot of, different types of food aid. They get pensions today that they didn't get for many, many years. They get pensions. So it may sound, sad and funny at the same time saying it, but if to a certain extent, a certain element of Holocaust survivors living in Ukraine that may be better off than people that are not Holocaust survivors, only to an extent. to an extent. It depends if they have housing or not. It depends on what amount of their money has to go for medicine, how well they are or sick they are, etc., and everything else. But to a great extent, people that are Holocaust survivors are getting a certain amount of aid regularly, that they know they're getting a pension, they've gotten reparation money, whatever it is they've gotten in general. Having said that, obviously, if the Joint Distribution Committee would not have set up the Chesed programs throughout Ukraine when they did 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation the way we are now. I mean, it's obvious that they actually saved many, many lives, prolonged many lives. So kudos to them and to the Claims Conference for having put that thing together.
Now talk to me about the nature of Jewish life in the Ukraine. You're an Orthodox rabbi. To what extent are the Jews of Ukraine and of Kiev, do they self-identify as Orthodox Jews? To what extent are you dealing with Jews who are something other than Orthodox?
I tried. My mother taught me when I was a kid that labels stick. So we don't do a lot of labeling in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and in Ukraine in general. We don't do a lot of labeling. Like, I don't tell people, come, I'm the Orthodox rabbi. Welcome. I leave that to the Reform and Conservative. They call me Orthodox. But there is a Reform congregation and a Conservative congregation, obviously a lot smaller. We teach what we like to call mainstream Judaism. That's basically what we're doing. So, we have the old synagogues and we have the old communities, and this is the Judaism that the Jews there remember. This is what they identify with. Do they keep Shabbos? I don't know. People ask me, are the Jews in Ukraine religious? How many of the 360,000 Jews in Ukraine are religious? Normally I say all of them. They say, really? I say, yeah. I say, how do you measure religion? I say, well, they eat matzah on Passover, so they must be religious, right? And they all eat matzah on Passover, so then everybody's religious. That's enough for me, right? So I don't like this, the whole labeling business. I don't think it's important. I get along very well with the Reform and the Conservative rabbis in Kiev. I'm doing my thing. I'm there for 24 years. I'm trying to bring Jews closer to Judaism one step at a time. And I have a day school. In my day school, none of the kids come from religious homes. None of the kids. And I have 200 kids in my day school. I also have another day school for religious kids.
What do you think brings them?
Initially, it was the free transportation, it was the free food, and it was the good computer rooms and stuff like that. That was in the 90s. But today, we have a very, very high, good level of secular education. We're building up that school and making it the best school in Ukraine, and that's I think what's going to bring it.
Very lovely. If you
had a lot of students, yuppies, young professionals, and students identify themselves as Jews, they will not become a part of the established community. They have their own brand, their own identity. And kol hakavod, I can identify with that as well. Let everybody, identify with the Judaism that they see, as long as it's bringing them closer to God.
But you really do embrace Klal Yisrael, don't you?
It's my job. It's what I get paid for.
I don't
get paid. I'm a volunteer.
Yeah, right. But you know what? It's the job of every rabbi, and yet not every rabbi understands Klal Yisrael.
It depends on their community, where they're working. Some people work with different types of communities, and they have to work with their community. My community is a default community. People ask, how many Jews are members in your community? I say, well, by default, all the Jews of Kiev are members of my community. So that's the community I have to embrace, because that's who I have to work with.
Yes, but I'm asking you a slightly more subtle question. I want a serious answer.
I'll try.
Okay. I'm asking you to what extent it does not sound like you are judgmental of Jews for a lack of observance, or better said, in some way you're willing to accept them anywhere they are along their own personal Jewish journey. That is not always the way in which rabbis who are identified with one movement or another movement operate. And I'm saying something that I mean as a compliment to you, but I don't want to compliment you if it isn't true. So I'm giving you an opportunity to say the extent to
disclosure.
Yes. To what extent is this who you are?
Yeah, that's who I am. That's what I'm there for. That's what I've been doing for the last 24 years. I came to a community that, in many ways, did not have what we would call in the United States Shomer Shabbos and kosher home Jews. I didn't have 10 Jews that keep Shabbos and kosher when I came there. Right. And no question about it, there was no minyan in the synagogue, even if a daily minyan. I had to reconstitute a community. That's what I'm saying. And I reconstituted this community based on the elderly Jews that were left and young Jews that joined it, and we built together and we grew together and we grow together, and that's the community that we have today. Is there an outreach community? That means an outreach community is you have to accept everybody the way they are.
Is there a kosher butcher?
Yeah, sure, it's kosher. A lot of kosher meat available, kosher grocery store, but it's European style, so it's in the synagogue. The kosher grocery store is down, in our community center. There's another one in the Chabad synagogue. Kosher restaurants, 3 kosher restaurants, one in our synagogue, one in the Chabad synagogue, one in the center of town. A lot of stuff going on.
In the center of town?
Yeah, center of town. There's a milchik, if you want a milchik.
Okay.
It's a great place.
Okay.
Great restaurant. Good food. I'm serious.
What's the name of it?
Cerebro, which means silver.
Okay. Is there a mikveh?
More than one. Yeah, a couple of mikvahs. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Ice mikvah. We have a gorgeous one we just opened.
Really?
In our community center. When I came, we had the synagogue, right? This old synagogue. And we got the land on 2 sides of it and built a community center around it. So on one side, we have an educational center, which has our Ivrit school, right? It's the religious school. We have a yeshiva with a kollel, dormitory, and staff housing. On the other side, we have a hotel, restaurant, mikveh, student center, youth center, community center. A really nice big building. And that's the life of our community.
Okay. And there are young Jews around?
Oh, yeah. We have only young Jews. We have only young Jews. I'll tell you a great story.
Yes.
When I came, my first Yom Kippur, the only kid in the synagogue was my son, who was, a year and a half old.
How many children do you have?
I have 8, can I have my own. Well, anyway, so this little kid, and he would come to the synagogue with me all the time, every Shabbos, and even during the week, because it was, and he would run the aisles, because there weren't many people there. Come Yom Kippur, and this place is packed. You could barely move, and my son is trying to run around. This is his playground. And one of the old men calls me over, and he says, Rabbi, this is not a kindergarten. What's this kid doing running around there? This is 1990. And I tell him, here's a chayin Rabbi, I say, if there won't be children here, we'll have no future here. The more we'll have children here, that's our future, the future of our community. Today, our synagogue is swamped with kids. And when I'm giving a sermon and kids are running around disturbing me, it's music to my ears.
But, you give me, Yaakov, you give me chills. There are still synagogues where they don't want kids in the sanctuary because they make noise. There are. No. Yes, it's
not in Ukraine.
But you're right.
Definitely not in Kiev.
Okay.
That is music to my ears.
It's music.
We have a beautiful, young, thriving, growing, budding community. When I was, full-time in the rabbi of that synagogue that I reconstituted and grew up, I was the candy man, and the kids would come in, and they would get candy every time they came. And this is it. This is what it's all about.
In terms of the community that you deal with, what's their feeling for Israel?
Let me tell you something. Well, we're very connected to Israel. We're only 3 hours away. Everybody has relatives in Israel. Everything goes on in Israel. Everything happens in Israel. So we're a very, very Israel-oriented community, obviously, because, the way we're set up. We do an interesting thing, actually. Last week we did it, is that on Purim, we celebrate Purim, obviously, on the first day of Purim, right? Unlike Jerusalem that celebrates, the next day. So when we finish our celebration of Purim in Kiev, usually like 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, I instituted this. We take a group of guys, go to the airport, get on a plane. Usually the flight's like 11 or 11:30. Get into Israel like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Next morning, drive to Jerusalem and celebrate a second day of Purim with the Jerusalem Jews.
Oh, how fabulous.
So this year, this is an unbelievable thing. We did it this year. We had 20 people in our group. This is one of the most, it's the greatest thing. You can imagine 2 days of Purim, But I've also done Passover trips for my community to Israel. We do a lot of stuff in Israel, and I do a lot of trips to Israel for members of the community. They were all on birthright probably at least once, and we're very Israel oriented. Don't forget our school is Ivrit school, the yeshiva, everything's in Ivrit. So we're Hebrew speaking sort of community to a great extent as well, which is a little bit unique in the diaspora, but that's the way it is. So all my teachers, volunteers, I don't know all, but most of them come from Israel. So it's but we identify a lot with Israel.
Yaakov, if there are people who've heard you talk about your life, the congregation, the community, and they want to help fund what you're doing, how do they reach out to you?
HelpKievJews.org. 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 That's the best way to do it. They can come visit, but not now.
Right. Yaakov, sum it up for me. If there was one thing you wanted to say, the sort of overarching description of who your community is, Jews of Ukraine, and you want to explain that to America, who's watching you now through Shalom TV, what is it that is the unique, special?
Defines.
Yes,
I would say Ukraine, the cradle of the Hasidic movement, where a piece of herring and vodka speaks to your heart. The emotional Judaism, that's what I would say. Ukrainian Jews are emotionally Jewish. They're not, they may not be, to an extent, shall I say, they don't have it in the ideological and all of this other stuff. They're emotionally Jewish. They feel their Judaism. They'll dance for their Judaism. They'll cry for it. They'll laugh for it. It's just in their blood and in their genes, that emotional Judaism, that chassidische Tanz, that chassidische, warmth that I think is there and that defines the Jews of Ukraine. It gives them their faith, right, that was passed down from their parents. That's what we call in Ukrainian emunah pshuta, which is the simple faith. That means they believe because that's the right way. Mm-hmm. They don't question their Judaism. They live with it, celebrate it, love it, and really, that's what it's all about.
And there's one more thing. They have you. You're a remarkable, very special, wonderful human being.
Don't go overboard. Compliment. I may start believing it.
You are one of the exceptional rabbis and Jews who help lead and shape what Jewish life is today. They are so lucky to have you. I am so lucky.
Are you offering me a job? I just want to know. Am I getting a job?
I told you before we go, I don't want you ever to leave. I want you to have your own show on Shalom TV. You are always welcome at this table. Kol tuva hatzlacha in all the work you do. You're making an enormous difference for world Jewry and Jews of Ukraine, and I'm honored to spend this time with you. You must do it often. Thank you.
Shiro vam dziękuję.
Thank you.
Pospinila makayo, a szpickayo. Okay, bye-bye.
My meeting with Rabbi Yaakov Dov Bleich, Chief Rabbi of the Ukraine, Kiev. I hope he's given you a better understanding of the Jewish community of the Ukraine. He certainly has for me. And again, he is one of the exceptional people who's helping to shape Jewish life today. I'm so glad you had a chance to meet him. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I love reading your comments. Special thanks to Naomi Vilko for making this edition of L'chaim possible. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.